Long before the girl was even born, the law that would one day seal her fate had been etched into the memory of her people. It was not written in books or carved into stone tablets, for the tribe did not rely on such records. Instead, it lived. In the chants of the elders, in the tales told around the fires at night, and in the whispered warnings mothers passed to daughters as they grew into womanhood. It was known as the law of blood, a code both feared and revered. The law decreed that a virgin girl, should she ever dishonor the tribe, whether by defiance, by forbidden love, or by suspicion of witchcraft, must be put to death. The sentence was hanging, public and absolute. This law was not seen as cruelty by the elders, but as preservation. To them, the purity of their people, the stability of their ways, required sacrifice. Even the innocent could become an offering to tradition. The origins of the law were shrouded in half-remembered history. Some said it began after a great betrayal, when a young woman gave secrets of the tribe to their enemies, leading to massacre. Others whispered that it was born from fear of spirits, for it was believed that virgins carried a dangerous power if they strayed from obedience. Whatever its true beginning, the law had grown into something larger than reason. It was sacred, unquestionable, a wall that none dared touch. Generations had passed under its shadow. Girls had died, sometimes guilty of nothing more than speaking too boldly, sometimes condemned by rivals, or by the cold calculations of men who used the law to rid themselves of obstacles. Yet none had been spared once the council declared judgment. Once the rope was tied, silence always followed because no one dared speak against it. The girl at the heart of this story had grown up with these warnings etched into her soul. From her earliest days, she heard her mother's hushed voice. Never cross the elders. Never let them see pride in your eyes. Walk carefully, daughter, for the law is sharper than a knife. She had obeyed always out of fear as much as love for her family. But fear does not shield one from envy, nor can obedience protect against lies. The elders, men with faces weathered by time and eyes hardened by authority, believed themselves guardians of balance. To them, the world was a fragile vessel, easily cracked by disobedience or softness. The law of blood was their answer, their assurance that no stain imagined or real would spread unchecked. They had convinced themselves that to sacrifice one life was to preserve many. Tradition had hardened into tyranny, and tyranny disguised itself as order to the common people. The law was like the sky, unchangeable, immovable. They might murmur in secret that it was too harsh, that the ancestors could not have intended such cruelty, but those words never left their huts. Fear strangled dissent before it could grow. Better to bow heads and survive than to risk joining the condemned. Thus, the law thrived not only because the elders enforced it, but because silence protected it. Execution days were treated as grim ceremonies. The condemned were led to the gallows at dawn when the sun painted the world in pale gold. Children were kept at a distance, but their eyes still peeked from behind their mothers' skirts. The men watched in stern silence, arms folded, their faces betraying nothing. Women wept quietly, though they dared not speak against the judgment. And when the rope tightened and the body swayed, the air filled with both horror and inevitability. Another warning had been given, another example made. This was the world the girl inhabited, a world where her very existence could become dangerous if someone powerful willed it. It was also the world that forged the Apache warrior who would one day rise against it. For he too had seen the noose tighten around those who had no crime but to live differently. He too had stood in the crowd as a child, staring at the lifeless, bodies that dangled like broken branches. And he too had once swallowed the silence that chained the tongues of the fearful. The law of blood was not merely a rule, it was a shadow that haunted every heart, a monster that fed on obedience. It kept people docile, It kept elders untouchable, and it kept justice twisted into something unrecognizable. It was a law that demanded sacrifice but gave nothing in return. And now it had turned its gaze upon her. The girl's name was Tayan, meaning new moon, for she had been born on a night when the sky was dark and the stars shone unchallenged. She was slender, quiet, and carried herself with a grace that set her apart. Her eyes, wide and watchful, reflected more than she ever spoke aloud. To many, she was a symbol of purity, a reminder of innocence unbroken. But to others, she was a target. It began with whispers. A broken pot outside her hut. A sickly goat in the herd. The faintest streak of smoke curling the wrong way from the fire. In most places, such accidents would pass unnoticed. But under the rule of the law of blood, even the smallest misfortune could be twisted into an accusation. The tribe, bound by fear and suspicion, had long learned to seek blame when shadows fell, and the easiest scapegoat was often the voiceless. Her accuser was not a stranger. It was Kia, a woman hardened by jealousy and bitterness. Kaya had once been praised for her beauty, but with time and loss, her pride had curdled into envy. She saw how Tayan's quiet grace drew eyes, how the young men spoke of her in hushed admiration, and she felt the sting of fading relevance. To Kaya, Tayan was not just an innocent girl. She was a reminder of what she had lost. And so she spun her venom into words. She speaks with spirits. Kaya hissed to the elders one evening, her face etched with false fear. I have seen her wander at night, whispering to the wind. I have seen shadows move where she walks. She is cursed. She is dangerous. The accusation spread like wildfire. Few questioned its truth after all. Had not misfortune struck the herd? Had not the sky turned gray for days? People, hungry for explanation, found her story easy to believe. Fear was fertile soil, and Kaya's poison took root. When Tayan was summoned before the council of elders, she felt her knees weaken. The circle of old men sat beneath the sacred tree, their staffs planted firmly in the earth, their expressions carved from stone. The air was heavy with judgment before a word was spoken. Tayan, intoned the eldest, his voice deep and brittle like dry wood. You have been named in accusation. You stand accused of bringing dishonor through secret dealings and witchcraft. What say you? Her voice trembled, but her words were steady. I have done no such thing. I speak to no spirits. I bring no harm. I am innocent. But innocence carried little weight against fear. The elders exchanged glances, their eyes calculating, their minds already bent toward tradition. The law of blood demanded severity, and they were men unwilling to appear weak before their people. To question the law was to question the very order they upheld. A murmur rose among the gathered crowd. Some pitied her. She was so young, so fragile. Others, eager to distance themselves from suspicion, nodded at the accusation, as though by condemning her they might shield their own families from the law's gaze. Only one voice rose in protest, a trembling plea from her mother, who rushed forward and clutched at the elder's feet. Please, she begged, tears carving paths down her cheeks. She is but a child. She has harmed no one. Spare her life, I beg you. The elder shook her off coldly. The law is older than pity, he said. The tribe must be preserved. And with those words, Tayan's fate was sealed. The sentence was death by hanging at dawn, as the law required. The crowd dispersed in silence, their faces averted from the girl's stricken figure. Some whispered prayers for her soul. Others turned their thoughts away entirely, unwilling to confront the cruelty they had just witnessed. To stand against it was unthinkable. To accept it was survival. That night, as Tayan sat in a small hut guarded by warriors, she felt the weight of despair settle over her. She thought of the rope, of the gallows, of the eyes that would watch her final moments. Her body trembled, but her spirit, though battered, did not break. She prayed not for herself, but for her mother, for the world she would leave behind, and for some unseen force that might show her mercy. Far away, beneath the same stars, a warrior named Dazan, whose name meant chief's son, though he carried no crown, felt a stirring in his chest. He had heard the murmurs of Tayan's sentencing, and something within him recoiled. He had lived under the law of blood all his life, but this time the shadow it cast struck too deeply. Injustice burned against his heart like a brand, and though he did not yet know it, the path of defiance had already begun to unfold beneath his feet. The night before the execution was colder than usual. The moon, full and unyielding, hung in the sky like a pale watcher, spilling its silver light over the camp. The wind whistled low through the branches, carrying with it the unspoken fears of the people. Inside their huts, families lay awake, whispering quietly or pretending to sleep. But no one truly rested. The sentencing of Tayan had unsettled the tribe in ways they dared not admit aloud. Everyone knew she was little more than a child untested, untouched, innocent. Her crime had not been proven, only spoken into existence by Kaya's jealous tongue, yet the law did not demand proof. It demanded obedience. And obedience, once given, left no room for questions. Still, doubt gnawed at the people like a hidden worm in fruit. Mothers pulled their daughters close, warning them once again never to stray from their tasks, never to attract unwanted attention, never to walk alone at night. Fathers said little, but their silence was heavy. They had seen too many lives crushed. Beneath the weight of tradition, and though their hands were strong, they felt powerless to lift it. Tayan's mother did not sleep at all. She sat outside the hut where her daughter was kept, rocking back and forth, her voice hoarse from prayer. Each time the guard shifted, she glanced at them with desperate hope. But their faces remained unmoved, trained into blankness by years of enforcing the law. Her grief was a storm they refused to acknowledge. Inside, Tayan sat in the darkness, her arms wrapped tightly around her knees. Every sound outside, the crackle of fire, the cough of a guard, the rustle of leaves felt magnified. She thought of the gallows, the wooden beam, the coarse rope that would soon circle her throat. Terror clawed at her chest, but she fought it, clinging instead to the small fragments of memory that gave her strength. Her mother's laugh, the feel of rain on her face, the song she once sang when she gathered berries. Yet even those memories, twisted into sorrow, would she be remembered as a curse? As a warning? Would the children whisper her name with fear, as they did the others who had been hanged before her? The thought cut deeper than the fear of death itself. The village was hushed, but silence was not the same as peace. Beneath the surface, unease rippled. Some whispered behind closed doors that the elders had gone too far this time, that the girls' blood would stain the tribe more than it would protect it. Others, fearful of being overheard, silenced their kin with sharp looks and muttered prayers. Fear was a stronger leash than any rope. Even Kaya, whose words had lit the fire, found herself restless. She had achieved what she wanted. Tayan condemned. Tayan erased. Yet her heart beat uneasily in her chest. She had expected triumph, but what she felt instead was the cold bite of dread. For deep down, beneath the layers of bitterness and envy, she knew the truth. Tayan's innocence was as clear as the stars above. And guilt, though she tried to bury it, clawed at her in the dark. Far from the guarded hut, Dazan, the Apache warrior, walked alone along the ridge that overlooked the village. His steps were heavy, not from weariness but from the weight of thought. He had witnessed many executions before, but this one was different. The law had always felt cruel, but never had it struck him so sharply as now. Perhaps it was the girl's youth. Perhaps it was the way her eyes had shone with quiet dignity even as the sentence was spoken. Or perhaps it was the accumulation of years, the buried anger of watching innocent lives sacrificed at the altar of tradition. Whatever the reason, Dazen's heart rebelled against the silence. He remembered standing as a boy beside his father, watching another girl older than Tayan, but just as innocent, hanged for disobedience. His father had whispered then, "Say nothing, live quietly. That is how we survive," and Dazen had obeyed. He had swallowed his outrage, buried it deep, and carried it into manhood. But tonight the memory rose unbidden, hot as fire. He looked. Down at the campfires glowing faintly below, at the hut where Tayan waited for dawn. His fists clenched. Fear bound the others, but fear would not bind him forever. Something inside him whispered of defiance, of breaking the silence that had shackled the tribe for too long. Yet he knew the cost. To challenge the law was to risk not only his life but his place among his people. He could be cast out, branded a traitor, even executed alongside her. Still, the thought of standing by watching another innocent girl climb the gallows filled him with a rage greater than fear. As the night stretched on, the silence of the tribe grew heavier, pressing down like a suffocating blanket. In the hush of that long night, Tayan waited for death, her mother wept, and Dazen wrestled with a choice that would soon ignite a storm. Dawn was coming. And with it, the gallows. The dawn that broke over the village was painted in muted colors, the sky streaked with pale gray and faint blushes of red. The fires of the night had burned low, and smoke curled lazily into the morning air. It should have been an ordinary sunrise, the kind that heralded another day of hunting, gathering, and survival. But to Dazen, it was the drumbeat of fate. He had not slept. He had spent the night walking the ridges, pacing the narrow trails between rock and cedar, his mind a battlefield. The law of blood clanged in his thoughts like an iron chain, heavy and merciless. Yet opposite, it rose the image of Tayan, fragile but unbroken, her face pale yet proud when she stood before the council. Innocent, condemned, alone, Dazen was no stranger to the law's cruelty. He had seen others perish under its command. Men executed for defiance, women for supposed impurity, children who had spoken out of turn. Each time, the tribe bowed its head and said nothing, telling themselves that survival meant silence. His own father had been among the voices that taught him disobedience is strength, resistance is death. But with each execution, something inside Dazen had chipped away. He remembered the girl years ago, Nayeli, her name had been, accused of dishonor, though her only crime had been refusing a marriage she did not want. She had begged for her life, her voice raw with desperation. The rope had silenced her. Dazen had been a boy then, powerless, his fists clenched at his sides. He had wept alone afterward, ashamed of his own helplessness. Now he was no boy. His body bore the scars of battle. His name carried weight among his people. He had fought enemies beyond their borders and returned victorious. He had hunted, provided, defended. His hands were strong enough now to break chains. And yet, what good was strength if it could not be used to protect the innocent within his own tribe? As he stood on the ridge, staring at the waking village, the question burned hotter than the rising sun. Was he a warrior only in name, or was he bound by something greater than tradition, by a duty to justice itself? The people below stirred. The guard shifted at the hut where Tayan was kept. The gallows, standing tall and waiting, cast its long shadow across the clearing. It looked less like a tool of order and more like the maw of a beast, eager to devour another life. Dazen's breath quickened. His heart pounded, not with fear, but with a clarity he had never felt before. For years he had buried his voice, just as his father taught him. For years he had allowed the law to crush others, convincing himself there was nothing he could do. But not today. Not this girl. He thought of Tayan's mother, weeping in the dirt. He thought of the silence of the people, the way they turned their faces away to protect themselves. And he thought of the elders, their power fed by that silence, their authority cemented by obedience. The law was not sacred. It was a weapon wielded by the few against the many. And weapons could be broken. A fire sparked in his chest. Not the fire of recklessness, but of conviction. He knew the risks. To stand against the law was to brand himself an enemy. He might be cast out, hunted, even killed. But a different death haunted him more, the death of his spirit, should he remain silent. To let Tayan hang without lifting a hand would be to surrender the last of his humanity. Dazan's awakening was not a loud thing. It did not come with shouts or war cries. It came in the stillness of his heart, in the steadying of his breath, in the quiet resolve that spread through his limbs. The warrior in him had been waiting for this moment all his life, not to fight an enemy across the horizon, but to fight the injustice festering within his own people. He descended the ridge slowly, each step deliberate, as though the earth itself marked his choice. His shadow stretched before him, long and unwavering. The sun climbed higher, casting light upon the gallows, upon the crowd beginning to gather, upon the girl who waited for her doom. Dazan's hand brushed the hilt of his blade, not in threat, but in reminder. He was ready. Ready to speak where others stayed silent. Ready to stand where others bowed. Ready to break the law that had shackled them all. And as he drew closer to the village, the warrior within him fully awoke. There would be no turning back. The morning of the execution dawned heavy with dread. The clearing where the gallows stood was crowded, though no one spoke above a whisper. The people gathered because they had to. Attendance was expected. Silence was demanded. It was not a celebration, but a ritual of obedience. To turn away would be seen as disloyalty. To protest would be to invite suspicion. The wooden gallows loomed at the center like a hungry beast, its beam stretching across the sky. The rope swung lightly in the morning breeze, fraying strands glinting in the sun. Children clung to their mothers, peeking through fingers to glimpse what they were too young to understand, yet too old to ignore. Warriors stood like sentinels. Around the crowd, their spears upright, their eyes hard. Tayan was brought forward with her wrists bound. Her mother stumbled after her, screaming until the guards dragged her back into the crowd. Tayan's face was pale but calm, her steps slow and deliberate, as though each one was carved into the earth itself. The murmurs in the crowd swelled as she mounted the platform. Some whispered pity, others hissed fear. All waited for the end. The eldest councilman stepped forward, his voice carrying like a drumbeat. By the law of blood, Tayan is condemned. She has been judged and found guilty of dishonor, of dealings with spirits, of endangering our people. By her death, balance will be restored. Let all who witness remember, the law is eternal. A hush followed, heavy as stone. The executioner reached for the rope. Tayan closed her eyes, and then a voice cut through the silence. Enough. It was not shouted, but it carried with such force that every head turned. At the edge of the crowd, Dazan stepped forward. His shoulders were squared, his stride purposeful. The people parted as he passed, some in shock, others in fear, for no one ever interrupted the council. His presence was a storm breaking the stillness, his defiance as sharp as a blade. He climbed the platform with steady steps, stopping between Tayan and the executioner. His hand rested on the hilt of his blade, not drawn, not threatening, but there, a reminder of the strength he carried. He faced the council, his dark eyes unwavering. "This law is no justice," he said, his voice low but clear. "It is a chain of fear. You call her guilty, yet where is the proof? Where is her crime? She is to die not for what she has done, but for what you fear. Gasps rippled through the crowd. No one had ever spoken so openly against the elders. Mothers clutched their children tighter. Warriors shifted uneasily. Even the executioner hesitated. His hand frozen on the rope, the eldest's face darkened. "Dazen," he said sharply, his tone laced with both authority and warning. "You dare stand against the law that has guided our people for generations? Step aside. Do not bring ruin upon yourself." But Dazen did not move. His voice grew stronger, carrying to the edges of the clearing. Guided? No, shackled. How many innocents have we buried under this law? How many have swung from this rope, condemned by whispers and lies? You say this brings balance, but it only feeds fear. It teaches our children that silence is survival and courage is death. That is not balance, it is decay. The people stirred, heads turned. Some looked at the ground, unwilling to be seen agreeing. Others' eyes flickered with something dangerous hope. One of the younger councilmen rose to his feet, his voice trembling with anger. "You dishonor your people, Dazen. You speak as if you are wiser than the ancestors. Do you think you stand above the law?" Dazen's gaze swept over the crowd, then back to the elders. His chest rose and fell with the weight of his choice. But his words rang clear. "I do not stand above the law. I stand against it. For if the law demands the death of the innocent, then the law itself is guilty." The silence that followed was alive, charged with fear and awe. The crowd was no longer still. Murmurs rose, sharp and urgent. The guards exchanged uncertain glances. Tayan's mother wept openly, clutching her chest. And Tayan, standing behind. Dazen opened her eyes wide for the first time, hope flickering there like the spark of a flame. The eldest slammed his staff against the ground. "You defy us before all the people. Then you too shall face judgment." Dazen did not flinch. He stood tall, his figure a shield before Tayan. "Then judge me," he said. "But know this, today I will not be silent. Today I will not. Let her hang." The gallows, once a symbol of finality, now trembled beneath the weight of something new defiance. For the first time in living memory, the law of blood had been challenged, not in whispers, but in the open, beneath the sun. Before the eyes of all Dot, and there would be no turning back. The clearing, once silent in submission, now boiled with unease. Dazen's words hung in the air like sparks threatening to ignite a wildfire. People shifted on their feet, whispers cutting through the crowd like the hiss of snakes. Some faces were pale with fear. Others glowed with something long buried recognition. Agreement, the dangerous stirrings of belief. The eldest elder slammed his staff into the ground again, his voice booming with forced authority. "Order! The law is the backbone of our people. Without it, we are nothing but dust in the wind. This warrior would tear it from us, leave us broken and cursed." The crowd murmured, half in agreement, half in doubt. The younger councilmen shouted there. Loyalty to the law, their words sharpened to cut down hesitation. "Do not listen to him. He is blinded by arrogance. He stands against the ancestors. To follow him is to invite ruin." But Dazen did not falter. He turned to face the people, his voice steady, carried by the weight of conviction. "Is it arrogance to defend the innocent? Is it betrayal to say what all of you feel in your hearts? You fear this law, yet you bow to it as if it were sacred. But tell me, has it ever protected you? Has it ever brought you peace? Or has it only stolen your daughters, your sisters, your wives, under the guise of order?" The people stirred again. Mothers clutched their daughters closer, eyes shining with tears. Fathers glanced at one another, shame burning in their silence. For many, Dazen's words touched wounds they had long tried to forget. The eldest's face hardened, but a shadow of uncertainty flickered in his eyes. He had expected obedience as always. But the people were shifting like sand beneath his feet. One of the elders, gray-haired but quieter than the rest, rose slowly. His voice trembled, not with anger, but with doubt. Perhaps? The boy has a point. The law was meant to protect us. Yet it has taken much, too much. If the people begin to doubt, silence. The eldest barked, cutting him off. His staff shook in his hand, his authority slipping like water through clenched fingers. Dazen stepped forward, closer to the council, his presence a looming challenge. You speak of the ancestors. I honor them. But do you believe they wanted this? That they gave us life only to bind us in fear? True strength is not in killing the weak, it is in protecting them. True honor is not silence, it is justice. The crowd erupted in murmurs now, no longer whispers. Some voices rose with courage. He speaks truth. The girl is innocent. How many more must die? Others, still bound by fear, hissed back. Do not be fooled. He will bring the Spirit's wrath upon us. The law cannot be broken. The air thickened, charged with the energy of division. Families clung to one another, torn between tradition and conscience. Warriors near the gallows shifted uneasily, gripping their spears, their eyes flicking between the council and Dazen. They were trained to obey, yet doubt gnawed at them too. The eldest, desperate, raised his staff high. If this warrior stands against the law, then he stands against us all. Guards, seize him. But when the guards moved, hesitation slowed their steps. None wanted to be the first to lay hands on Dazen, whose reputation as a fearless fighter was matched only by the respect he commanded among them. Their eyes betrayed. Uncertainty, was he truly a traitor, or was he the only man brave enough to speak the truth they all feared? Dazen turned, placing himself fully between Tayan and the noose. He spread his arms slightly, his voice rising above the chaos. If you would kill me, then kill me here before all your people. Let them see you silence not only the girl, but the warrior who dared to speak. Let them see that the law protects nothing but your power. The words struck like thunder. The crowd gasped, and for the first time, the elders faltered. Their authority, once absolute, was cracking. They could feel it in the way the people no longer lowered their eyes, in the way the guards hesitated, in the way the air itself seemed to turn against them. The clash was no longer just between Dazen and the council, it was within every heart in the tribe. Tradition demanded obedience. Justice demanded defiance. And for the first time in living memory, the people were forced to choose. Tayan stood behind Dazen, her breath shallow, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and awe. She had expected death. Instead, she found herself at the heart of a storm, protected by a man who had dared to speak where no one else would. The gallows loomed still, but its shadow no longer seemed so certain. The clearing trembled with unrest. The elders, who had long ruled with silence and fear, now found themselves standing on unstable ground. Dazen's defiance had cracked their hold, and the people's whispers, once buried in secrecy, now spilled into the open like water rushing through a broken dam. The eldest elder's face was tight with rage. His knuckles whitened around his staff as though gripping it harder might restore the authority slipping from his grasp. You would tear apart the foundation of our people, he spat at Dazen, his voice trembling with fury. Your arrogance poisons the air. If we let this stand, we invite chaos. We invite the wrath of the spirits themselves. Dazen did not flinch. His voice was calm, but it carried the strength of iron. What you call chaos is truth. What you call wrath is justice. Long denied. If you believe the spirits bless this law, then let us test it. Let them decide whether she lives or dies. A hush fell over the crowd. Eyes widened. Heads turned. The suggestion was dangerous, bold, and impossible to ignore. Trial by ordeal, the sacred challenge, was older than the law of blood itself. Few dared invoke it, for it was said the spirits watched closely when such trials were made. The eldest narrowed his eyes. "What do you propose, Dazen?" Dazen stepped forward, his shadow stretching across the platform where Tayan stood. His voice rang out, steady and unyielding. "Spare the girl. Place the burden upon me. If I survive the trial, then the spirits have spoken. She is innocent, and the law has been broken. If I fail, then take my life instead of hers. Let the ancestors decide." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Such a challenge was unheard of. To offer one's life in place of another's was an act of supreme courage or madness. Mothers pressed their hands to their mouths. Fathers muttered in disbelief. And Tayan's mother, tears streaking her face, sank to her knees, whispering prayers as if clinging to a miracle. The elders exchanged tense glances. They were cornered. To refuse the challenge would expose their weakness, their fear of the very spirits they claimed to serve. But to accept it was to risk losing not only Tayan, but their grip on the law itself. Finally, the eldest spoke, his voice sharp and reluctant. "So be it. The trial will be held. But know this, Dazen, you gamble not only with your life, but with the fate of us all." Dazen nodded once, his jaw set. "I gamble only with truth. And truth does not fear trials." The crowd stirred, excitement mingled with dread. Some wept openly, torn between hope and terror. Others whispered that perhaps, at last, someone had the courage to break the chains that had bound them for generations. The trial chosen was one of the oldest, the Circle of Spears. Warriors would surround the challenger, spears poised, while he stood unarmed. He must endure until the spirits showed their will, either by granting him strength to overcome or by allowing his body to fall. It was a test of courage, endurance, and divine favor. Few survived as preparations began. Tayan was led down from the gallows. For the first time since her sentencing, the rope was removed from her neck. Her eyes found Dazen's, wide with disbelief. She had expected to die alone, forgotten. Now a warrior stood in her place, ready to stake his life for hers. Her lips trembled, but no words came, only tears that glistened like dew in the morning light. Dazen stood tall in the clearing as the warriors formed the circle around him, their spears gleaming. He removed his blade and laid it gently on the ground. He raised his chin, meeting the eyes of those around him. "If the spirits are just," he said, "let them bear witness today." The people held their breath. Even the wind seemed to pause. The air charged with anticipation. The circle tightened. Spears lowered. The trial was about to begin, and with it, the fate of Tayan, of Dazen, and perhaps of the law itself. The circle of spears tightened, their steel tips catching the light of the rising sun. The air in the clearing was thick, every breath shallow, every heart pounding with the weight of what was about to unfold. The crowd pressed in at the edges, silent but trembling. They had never seen such defiance, never witnessed the law of blood challenged so openly. And now everything rested on one man's endurance, one man's faith. Dazen stood in the center, his chest bare, his arms loose at his sides. His blade lay on the earth behind him, a symbol that he would face the trial with nothing but his spirit. His eyes locked on the circle of warriors who surrounded him, spears poised, bodies tense. These were men he had fought beside, hunted with, shared fire and food with. Now they were his testers, his executioners, or his witnesses to destiny. Eldest raised his staff. "Begin." The first warrior lunged, his spear darting like lightning. Dazen moved with the precision of a predator, his body twisting just enough for the strike to graze his skin but not pierce. Another spear thrust from behind, Dazen dropped low, rolling across the dirt, rising with the grace of a mountain cat. The circle closed, spears striking in rhythm, faster, harder. The crowd gasped as each strike drew closer, as each near miss seemed destined to end him. But Dazen did not falter. His breath came steady, his muscles burning with controlled fire. He parried without weapons, his hands deflecting shafts, his body flowing between death and survival. Blood marked his skin where the spears nicked him. But his spirit burned brighter than pain. Minutes stretched like hours. Sweat drenched him, his body trembling with fatigue. The warriors, too, began to slow, their strikes losing rhythm as doubt crept into their hearts. This was no ordinary trial. This was no ordinary man. At last, one warrior hesitated. His spear froze mid-thrust, his eyes locking with Dazen's. In that gaze, he saw not arrogance but unbreakable resolve, the kind of strength that comes not from pride but from sacrifice. Slowly, almost reluctantly, the warrior lowered his weapon. Another followed, and another. The circle began to break, the spears dipping one by one. Murmurs surged through the crowd like the roar of distant thunder. The trial was not finished, yet the outcome was already written in their hearts. Dazen staggered, bloody but unbowed, and raised his voice, raw but thunderous. "You see, elders, you see, people, I stand still. The spirits did not strike me down. They gave me breath, they gave me strength. Not for myself, but for her." He turned, pointing to Tayan, who stood trembling at the platform's edge, her eyes wide with tears. "If she were guilty, I would have fallen, but I stand. And by that, the law is broken." The people erupted. Cries of agreement, shouts of defiance, voices long silenced now burst forth like floodwaters breaking a dam. Mothers wept openly. Fathers raised their fists. The weight of fear that had bound them cracked, giving way to something new, something fierce. Hope. The elders were pale, shaken. Their power, once absolute, had slipped through their fingers like sand. The eldest raised his staff again, but the sound of his command was drowned beneath the roar of the crowd. No one bowed their heads now. No one turned away. Tayan's mother pushed forward, falling at Dazen's side, clutching his hand as though he were salvation itself. Tayan stepped down from the platform, her steps hesitant but growing stronger. She approached Dazen, her voice trembling but clear. You saved me." Dazen shook his head, his chest heaving with exhaustion. "No. The spirits saved you. I only gave them the chance to speak." The sun rose higher, spilling golden light over the clearing. It bathed Tayan's face, lit the tears on her mother's cheeks, glinted off the fallen spears that no longer pointed in judgment. The gallows still loomed, but it seemed smaller now, a relic of fear outshone by the dawn. The law of blood was not erased in a single moment, but its chains had cracked. The people had seen a warrior defy it and live. They had seen innocence protected. And once the heart learns it can resist, it cannot return to silence. Dazen, bloodied but standing, had become more than a warrior. He had become a symbol. And symbols cannot be hanged. That morning, as the sun crowned the sky, the people turned their faces toward a future they had not dared to dream of. Tayan lived. The tribe breathed freer. And the law of blood, once unbreakable, had begun to crumble. It was not just a new day. It was a new dawn.